Good afternoon, friends. Stephen Benoon here with Israeli News Live. Today is June 7th, 2025, and I have on the screen right here a picture of a book written by Robert Liardon. And I always kind of thought that was an interesting name for this book here, God's Generals. And he's written about, in fact, he's actually written many books on what he calls God's generals. This one here are called the Healing Evangelist, like Oral Roberts, Hunters, and their Bosworth and Summerall. You have those kind of names mentioned in there. He also writes about William Branham. He writes about Smith Wigglesworth. Many of these guys are known as the healing evangelist of the late or the early 20th century, going back from around the 1930s, coming all the way up to the 70s and 80s with Oral Roberts. And so many people came to know them. But what we're not really looking at very closely is what was their message besides, and no doubt, I'm not here to criticize there's so many miracles that happen. There's no doubt about it. So it certainly cannot be argued. But we have to look at the message that followed that. It was very much a pro-Israel message as well. And that's something that people forget about. And of course, oddly enough, in 1909, when Scofield, with the Oxford Press, released the Oxford Bible, which, by the way, many of the board members of the Oxford Press back in that time period were Freemasons. I want you to keep that in mind as well. And then, of course, we have the advent of World War One, which happens in 1914, only 5 years after the release of the Scofield Bible, and that's what begins the fall of the Ottoman Empire. That's what begins the dividing of the land in the Middle East, and ultimately with World War II, that will be the beginning of the state or the modern state of Israel. But they had to have a pretext. They had to have Christian support here in the United States to be able to make all that happen. Well, the question, though, comes down to, does Jesus ever talk? Oddly enough, he does. If you go to the book of Matthew in chapter 7, he says here in verse 21 to 23, not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, notice, many, not a few, many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name? And in thy name have cast out devils, and in thy name done many wonderful works. He doesn't argue the fact of that. He doesn't argue the fact that there's great healing campaigns, prophecies galore that actually come to pass. He doesn't even argue that at all. But he says this, and then will I profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you that work iniquity. Then we can't help but wonder, where does this word iniquity even come from? Now, in the Old Testament, there are several times that the word iniquity appears in the Old Testament. And keeping in mind, of course, Jesus was from that time period when the New Testament had, as of yet, had not been written. But Matthew uses the word iniquity here. And so we begin to look at the basis of that word and looking at that, because granted, we're getting this in a Greek form, right? And in that Greek form, let me just go back to some of the notes that I've made myself on all this. Um, when you look at the Greek format of what was said here, going into the original use of this language here, it comes from two words put together, and that is Gosh, find the notes, Steve. I got so many notes here. Boy, I was really getting into a lot of. Here we go, right here. It is from the Middle English, which is from an old French word. Iniquité is the French word, which in turn comes from the Latin word iniquitas, meaning unjust, unequal, unfair. It's from the word in, which means not, iniquas, which means equal or fair. It's totally not equal. There's no equality, in other words, in this at this point here. And when you look at that, I really wanted to find out because I had a revelation in my heart. So I had to be sure that my revelation matched what the Word of God actually says. So when you begin to study and look at these words that are used here for iniquity, okay, right here, we have in here, for example, in Hosea chapter 4, in Hosea chapter 4, where he says here, they eat up the sin of my people and they set their heart on their iniquity. Now, this word, and the reason why I chose the book of Hosea, because Hosea uses two forms of the word iniquity. There's actually three, and in that form is avon, which is a perversity, that which is morally evil, is what it means. It's a fault, it's a mischief. And most people translate iniquity in the New Testament, they think of just lawlessness. Because of this word right here from the Old Testament, which is quite common in the earlier chapters in Genesis, Exodus, all the places where Moses writes about it, he pretty much writes it from that standpoint. But Hosea also uses another version of the word, which translates in English as iniquity. Gilead is a city of them that work iniquity and is polluted with blood. But in that case, that version is what we have in Matthew as far as that meaning. Notice at the bottom here, unjust, unrighteous. Okay, same thing I just told you a minute ago. It is an unequal, unfair, or unjust. And if you look at the Hebrew Matthew, and I want to establish this first for you, the basis of the foundation of what we're looking at here before I go into the revelation that's in my heart about this, which is going to be very shocking to many of you. But if you go to the Hebrew Matthew in chapter 7, verse 23, we have it right here at the very last part here, Avan. Avan is the very Hebrew word that we see in Hosea chapter 6, verse 8. It is truly the unjust, the unequal, is the word that Jesus was speaking about there. So if we go back, just so you can see it, Aleph Vav Nun, and if you look at first, say for example, Hosea 4:8, it's a different word. It's Ein Vav Nun, Avon. Okay, but in Hosea 6:8, he chooses a different word to use here. And that word is Aleph Vav Nun, the word for unjust, unrighteousness. Okay, so this is the right word to actually use there. So let's go back now and let's take a look at what Matthew says again. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name, and in thy name have cast out devils, and in thy name done many wonderful works? In other words, they're using the name of Jesus Christ. They're casting out devils. They're healing the sick. They're doing all kinds of amazing, wonderful things. But he says, then I will profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you that work iniquity, you that are working an unjust, unrighteous act. What unjust and unrighteous act then is being committed? Well, let's take a look at Hosea for a moment then. Let's look at what Hosea actually says here. And I just did this in the message I did the other day about the wheat and the tares, right? For I desire mercy, not sacrifice, and knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. Boy, that's interesting. It's kind of like where Jesus says, oh, they come there and they say, oh, we do all kinds of miracles. We're doing all the things that you did, Jesus, when you were here. But God said he desired mercy. But they, like men, have transgressed the covenant. There have they dealt treacherously against me. Gilead, notice the city Gilead, is a city of them that work iniquity. It is covered with footprints of blood. And its troops of robbers wait for a man, so doth the company of priests that murder in the way toward Shechem. Yea, they commit enormity. And even though these well-known ministers, as well as they may have meant, they cast out devils, they prayed for the sick, they had great healing revivals, Oral Roberts, A. Allen, William Branham, Smith Wigglesworth, every one of these men had some amazing things that were happening in their ministry, but they had one iniquity in their ministries, and that was the supporting of a modern state of Israel to be built based on Scofield's lie. Scofield put all these footnotes in the Bible. They were then produced by Oxford Press. Then they put it into Moody Bible Institute, and that became the plumb line in 1909 for the way the world was to go and which direction it was to turn into. And then guess what happens next? 1914, World War I breaks out. And then it begins to spread. And as the war is breaking out, the pulpits are turning afire as they begin to change the doctrine that had been believed for nearly 1,800 years before that. The church fathers all, who had simply talked about Israel being destroyed, judgment was brought by the Romans. And now everything that was believed by the apostles early on, the early church fathers, turned upside down. Now the lies were coming in. Regardless of all that wonderful things that they were doing, see, they were doing all their burnt offerings. They were carrying out Moses' law to the record. But God said, I desired mercy, not this bloodshed. But he even says, and as troops of a robbers wait for a man, so doth the company of priests, just like this. They were waiting on him. The priests sent their guards down there to get him. And now it's only manifested far more over. Now, what is that? We have in our last book there where it says there, next to the book of Revelation, where he talks about they entered in among us unawares. That serpent group has entered in among us unaware. Now, it gets worse, right? He goes on to say, in the house of Israel, I've seen a horrible thing. Their harlotry is found in Ephraim. Israel is defiled. Also, Judah, there is a harvest appointed for you when I will turn the captivity of my people. Judah didn't get any better because she went and played the whore as well. That's why in Revelation she's called the whore of Babylon. Why? Because it was in Babylon, in the day of Babylon, 2,500 years ago, that Judah was playing the whore out there with all the different nations that were Nephilim nations. You wonder why Jesus called them a bunch of serpents, vipers, and everything else. He knew who they were. But he did know there was a remnant there. He was looking for that remnant. That's what he was looking for. Well, it gets more interesting. Not only that, we have over here in Matthew chapter 13, the field is the world. Remember, I shared this with you the other day. The good seed are the children of the kingdom, but the tares are the children of the wicked one. Wow. The tares are the children of the wicked one. Who's the one that stuck these tares in while everyone was asleep, not paying attention to the Scofield doctrine stuck in your face? The wicked one. His children intermingled amongst them. Even in the Freemasonry, going back to the late 1700s, early 1800s, and I don't consider Freemasonry good in the first place, but they started infiltrating in there, rewriting their bylaws, slipping in the Noahide Prussian Knight 21st degree Mason law into there, all the way up until the Masons ended up bringing in their Oxford Press 1909 Cyrus Scofield. Remember what I told you about Daniel chapter 7, verse 25? They think to change the times, not the word law, it's decree. It is a Persian word used right there in the text, which means decree. They want to change what Cyrus, the true Cyrus, not the fake Cyrus, but the true Cyrus that was to rebuild the temple for the coming of the Messiah, Jesus Christ. And the only reason it was to be rebuilt was because it was supposed to be there when he came. But they want to rewrite his time frame of 2,000 years ago or 2,500 years ago, rebuilding the temple at that time and put it to a modern day. So they bring you another Cyrus to write you a new scroll, to give you a new law, a new decree for a modern state of Israel, and everybody fell for it. So he says the enemy that sowed them is the devil. That's who sowed all these false ministers in there as well. The harvest is the end of the world, and the reapers are the angels. As therefore the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so shall it be in the end of this world. The Son of Man will send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend them which do what? Iniquity. He gathers them what? The ones that do what? They are unjust. And it's not just the fact that they come in there and they create World War I, World War II, they divide all the lands up, but now, even now, the ministers are jumping up and down in the pulpits. They're worse than the ones that were first coming there, because now they're jumping up and down in the pulpit and cheering on Israel. We stand with Israel. Israel's got a right to defend itself. Kill all the kids. You might as well say it. You might pretend you don't support it, but when you stand with Israel and you don't bend, and you politicians that are just as evil and no good, you'll find your place right along the rest of these here. You're killing all the innocents. You're doing like Gilead did. You know what's fascinating? In the book of Hosea, God is actually quoted from Hosea. Is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there? But the daughter of my people, they're sick. See? You brought your healing ministers in, but the sad thing is, you turned around and told the people a lie. You were unequal and unjust. You made the Arabic people as if they're nobody and exalted a people that came out of the ashes of Germany, forgetting that many of Hitler's own cabinet members were all Jewish in the first place. Forgetting that the Jewish Congress sent to death Hungarian 800,000 Jews to their death while they rescued their little tiny 1,000 plus remnant and took them to Israel to set up the state. No wonder why God condemns Gilead, condemns the priest, and he says that it is covered with footprints of blood. So is Gaza, covered with the footprints of blood. Judgment awaits you is what is coming next. Micah also Micah uses a different word of iniquity. It's actually Allah is what it uses, or aval, that build up Zion with blood and Jerusalem with iniquity. Verse before, hear this, I pray you, you heads of the house of Jacob, and rulers of the house of Israel, that abhor justice and pervert all equity. Then build up Zion with blood and Jerusalem with iniquity. The heads thereof judge for reward, and the priests thereof teach for hire, and the prophets thereof divine for money. Yet will they lean upon the Lord and say, Is not the Lord in the midst of us? No evil shall come upon us. Sounds like all these ministers today, and even going back then. No, nobody want to tell you the truth, though, do they? They don't want to tell you the truth at all. Let me play a little clip here for you from Jeffrey Sachs does. Um,
right now by Trump administration.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's important for us to understand where this entire war came from. It did not come from Bashar al-Assad. It came from Washington. There was a decision in 2011 to overthrow Assad. Actually, that came from Jerusalem. This has been a desire of the Israeli government that stretches back more than 25 years. Netanyahu's idea is make the Middle East in Israel's image, overthrow every government that opposes Israel. He's had a friend in that, and that is the CIA and the United States government. So this war in Syria did not come from Assad's repression. It did not come from Assad's dictatorship. This war came from a presidential order by Obama to overthrow Assad, starting in the spring of 2011. We have a name for this program. It was Operation Timber Sycamore. The United States, together with other countries in this region, trained fighters, especially jihadists, including the ones that just took power, to overthrow the regime. This created chaos. 600,000 dead in Syria in a war that has gone on for 14 years. The outcome of this war is what the CIA wanted back in 2011, which is that a jihad group would take power in Syria after being armed by the United States. The reason I want to be clear about this is that we will not have peace in this region until we have
Now, unfortunately, as much as I appreciate Jeffrey Sachs' comments here, we won't have peace in the region until Christ just the whole mess that has been made. One thing I was wanting to play in here, and I thought I had it at the right point here, I didn't. He says this war has been going on for over 100 years. He's going back to World War One. And he does say that in this interview. I'll put the link for you in the description below. Over 100 years. And no, it was not Bashar al-Assad, and no, he did not gas his people, as clearly brought out by Seymour Hersh and Aaron Erdem, a former parliament member of the Turkish parliament, where they had the evidence that the ISIS militants brought in the sarin gas with the help of Erdogan at that time, who was then the prime minister of the country. And they allowed them to go in and they threw out the case that was being investigated against them. They are like troops of robbers with blood on their feet, just like what God said in his word. And as he pointed out, the order come from Jerusalem, from the Israeli government. He clearly identifies Netanyahu in much of the evils that are going on there. I also want to share with you too, Matthew 24. Many false prophets shall rise and shall deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. If you've never seen the love of many in this nation here waxing so cold-hearted, when you see televised before your very eyes the genocide of a people in the Middle East, the people of Gaza, not just Gaza, as he pointed out, as Jeffrey pointed out, 600,000 were killed in Syria. Do you know how many Christians were nearly wiped completely out? Not all the way, but nearly completely out. Isaiah, when he prophesied that Damascus would fall and would be a ruinous heap, was fulfilled. And that the fortress of Ephraim, which is the house of Israel, that was the first believers in Jesus Christ's ministry, that their fortress would end. It ended when Bashar al-Assad was thrown out. You have watched some of the most powerful prophecies come to pass in modern times, and it's going right over the heads of the people because everyone is blinded down, and so many hearts have been waxed cold-hearted. When you can sit there and see these little children, their limbs blown off and everything else, and justify and say, well, Israel has a right to the land. God gave them that land. God threw them out of the land. Do you not remember that Jesus brought judgment upon them? He said, your house is left unto you desolate. And I don't see none of them saying, he says, until you say, blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord. If they ever recognized that Jesus Christ was the true Messiah, they wouldn't be over there bombing and killing the people in Gaza. They say that, oh, the children, Hamas is underneath the hospital, so we had to kill everybody in the hospital just so we could get that one little terrorist. Terrorism reigns from the Knesset. And God's judgment will come upon this nation. In 2 Kings, by the way, and this is Gilead right here, right? Assassinations were going on. In the 5th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Perkiah, the son of Menahem, began to reign over Israel and Samaria and reigned 2 years. He did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. He departed not from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, wherewith he made Israel to sin. But Pekah, the son of Remaliah, his captain, conspired against him and smote him in Samaria in the castle of the king's house by Argob and Uriah, and when with him 50 men of the Gileadites, and he slew him and reigned in his stead. See, so Gilead was very much involved in assassination plots. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Jeremiah, the harvest is past, the summer is ended, and we are not saved. For the hurt of the daughter of my people am I seized with anguish. I am black appallment hath taken hold on me. Is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there? Why then is not the health of the daughter of my people recovered? Oh, that my head were waters and mine eyes a fountain of tears, that I might weep day and night for the slain of the daughter of my people. Just like Herod slaughtered and murdered all the children to try to get to Jesus, the same Herod sits in Jerusalem today, giving the orders with his whole cabinet of Jezebel prophets. Those are the modern day ministers, calling for the blood of all the innocent, so they can make way for the Trumptopia that they want to turn Gaza into. And Trump is just as evil and wicked, and so is Biden and all the rest of them. There needs to come an end. There will come an end, and there will be a day of reckoning, because Jesus said there would be. And that's what he said. The tares will be gathered together, and they will be burned. I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live. Stand with our work that we do here. Our website is israelnewslive.org. I'd like to see the courage to stand and support the truth. Paul does say the labor is worthy of his hire. Stand with us, won't you?